Hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to the Roundtable. The future of life is perhaps the broadest topic of our symposium, broader than the future of work and education. So I'm looking forward to a wide-ranging discussion this evening. So we're going to start with the results of the knowledge huddle that was held 2 days ago on the future of life. Let's recall for a minute what a knowledge huddle is. It's a methodology that was created by the GRASP network to foster understanding of subjects which are usually hard to think about because of their abstract nature. The unique feature of the methodology is that we facilitate these meetings using visuals and artworks in the thinking process. So we have invited a representative of the knowledge huddle that was held on Tuesday to prepare for the symposium today to deliver a brief report on the results of the huddle. So I would like now to invite Fia to give us a short wrap up of what happened in the knowledge huddle on Tuesday.
Yes, so my name is Fia Nurminen, and I'm here to present briefly the outcome of the knowledge huddle we had this Tuesday. We were a group of 6 people who have never met before and probably do not have too much in common, but we gathered together to discuss about the common future and how it's going to be using the art in the process. In the huddle, we had 2 rounds, and I'm here showing the thoughts from the second round. So these represent the ideas of not us as individuals, but us as a group. And so these are being something we produced together during the process. To summarize the discussion in 3 points, we concluded that first, we acknowledge that the future is not going to be the same for everyone. We have to learn how to create connections between the different worlds. And instead of erecting walls, we need to build bridges instead. Related to this, the second takeout is that we need to learn to see the world from a different perspective and to concentrate on things we can agree on instead of fighting about the details. That not only slows us down, but does not take us anywhere, which is something we simply cannot afford at this point. This takes us to the third point. The time is running out. We need to rely on science, and we need a human intervention for creating a future worth fighting for. We still do have hope, but the hope is not passive. We cannot wait the problems and threats to solve themselves, but we need to act. These were, in brief, the outcomes of our knowledge huddle. I thank you.
And thank you very much, Fia, for this presentation of the results. We have a prestigious panel today. I would like to introduce the members of our panel. The first that I would like to introduce is Professor Peter Weibel, who is with us today. Peter, you by all means turn on your video so that we can see and hear you. Santiago, the same for you. Excellent. So Peter Weibel has been a central figure in the European arts and media scene for decades. For over 20 years now, he has been chairman and CEO of the ZKM, which is the Center for Art and Media in Karlsruhe, Germany. And since 2017, he has been director of the Peter Weibel Research Institute for Digital Cultures at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. Up there in the upper right, up there left-hand corner of my screen, you can see Santiago Espinosa de los Monteros Arespuru, who is the CEO of Toroto in Mexico. This is a Mexican startup company working in creating value within the carbon management ecosystem. This is where Santiago is managing a technical team that operates along the whole value chain of the carbon market, and they have expertise in building greenhouse gas inventories, mitigation strategies, science-based targets, and forest restoration projects. We will be rejoined later on by Gareth, whom you met in the last speech, in order to have a representation also for the discussion concerning issues in health, in the future of health. So I would like to begin with something that seems like a fundamental question for the future of life, which was a common theme in every single talk this evening. And this is, how do we need to adjust our view of the role of humankind going forward? We heard, on the one hand, Julian Nieder-Rümelin noted that humankind must protect itself. We must avoid the self-depreciation of human competencies in the face of technical advances like artificial intelligence. On the other hand, we also heard Gabriela and Daniel mentioning, well, the idea of moving back a bit from anthropocentric exceptionalism. And in fact, in the Knowledge Huddle 2 days ago, it was observed by several people that the so-called golden ratio, in the sense of let's say, the natural order of things, no longer seems to be in balance today. So I'd like to start by asking each of you individually, what are your thoughts on how we should view our own role as humankind in the future of all life? So let's start, if possible, with Peter, whose institution right now has an exhibition called Biomedia, which even discusses whole new ways of looking at what life is. So Peter, can you give us your thoughts?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank also previous speakers, because it was a tour de horizon, which was very inspiring. Thank you all the speakers before our discussion round. And I would like, during this session, to speak to some aspects of these different lectures. But coming to your question, it is precisely an exhibition which has to do with the question of artificial intelligence and with digital humanism. And to sketch it shortly, in the 19th century, we have invented motion machines. Suddenly, so the Greek, and before the Renaissance, we had no mathematics of dynamics, we had no machines. But in the 19th century, with the Industrial Revolution and with all intentions, we have invented vehicles, from car to train, bicycle, wheel-based vehicles. So suddenly, we had command about motion, the famous motion machines, from mobile to bicycle. And you must know, these machines have been wheel-based. And now, from this, we developed machines. If you remember, the camera and the projector in cinema have also been wheels. So with the same technology, with the wheels, we invented the motion media. Therefore, it's called movie and moving pictures. This was the first attempt to imitate life. This was a subject of Nieder-Rümelin. And we realized that people move, it's okay, but it was black and white, so we had to invent color film. Then we realized that it's silent, then we had to invent speaking film. Now finally, in the 20th century, we have this kind of illusion, an imitation of life on a two-dimensional plane. And now, but this was wheel-based, and separately the change. Suddenly the information was not stored anymore chemically or magnetically. As information you could not change in real time. But now with electronic media, we can change the information in real time in the technical system. So we have a so-called virtuality of data storage. When you have the virtuality of data storage, you can change it immediately. So you have variability of image content. We can change images. But when you have both variability and virtuality, finally the system becomes viability. That means we have systems which can behave This is not the point. Not imitate, not simulate. These technical systems today, we can behave like life. So we have systems with lifelike behavior. This is what I call biomedia. And naturally, all these systems need artificial intelligence and need software and algorithms. In art, this is also a point, the scandal in art began with the mechanics of photography. There was a machine who could make a picture untouched by human hands. And after photography came cinema, so etc. So we have been used that we have in art a kind of co-production with the help of machines, with hardware. And now comes the point which makes people anxious, that now we can even use software. We can use codes, algorithms, artificial intelligence to create something together with the machine. So we use the monopoly of the artist. We use a little bit the monopoly of the human being because suddenly he can cooperate and co-produce with software, codes, and artificial a new product. And this is my prediction for sure. The next century will be the century of biomedia. And now it comes again a little bit, when this happens, this is not the first time in history. This is what people forget. It happens the first time in history between 800 and 1200 in Muslim Arabia. So the first Renaissance, the discovery of perspective was not in Italy. The first Renaissance, mechanical machines on the highest level ever, was invented between 800 and 1200. Then we had the Italian Renaissance, and the Renaissance means nothing else, because Leonardo da Vinci said in his first sentence about the Trattato di Pittura, he said, painting is a science. That means Renaissance is a scientification of art. This you have today again, with hardware, with software, etc. We have now artists and scientists share the same pool of tools. We share the same tool of tools. Therefore, it is not only, this is a little mistake of this wonderful survey of Nomina, not only science will save us, because this is something that they realize today. Maybe 30 to 50%, 30 to 50% in America do not believe anymore in the state, do not believe anymore in the media. They're even skeptical to science. What they experience today with this debate about COVID, there's something very new. 30 to 50% from Europe to America are skeptical to science. This is new. Therefore, science cannot help us anymore. This has to do with the next important point. We don't face reality. We don't face reality. We don't want to face reality. So it means, but now comes art. And art, and I prepared an exhibition in 1 year, which is called Renaissance 3.0, because after Arabian Renaissance, after the Italian Renaissance, we have now in 21st century a new Renaissance where science and art converge. We are working with the same pool of tools. We have the same machines as scientists. This is the scientists have different aims, but we share the same tools. So the scientification of art is again here, very new. And this, therefore, it can help also to be not too skeptical on artificial intelligence, because Gerrit Spresch mentioned very well the role of artificial intelligence in health. It means when the patient has in real time an electrocardiogram, so the doctor, a normal doctor, human being can memorize 100 different models of an electrocardiogram. So the computer can store 1 million. So he can take the cardiogram, put it in the computer, and the computer will tell him this cardiogram, electrocardiogram, is 600,000 times, and it has a sickness. I give you the name. The patient will die in half an hour if you don't inject him such and such chemical. So artificial intelligence is a helpful agent. I'll give you a simple example. When you are driving with your car in a rush hour, there's a very old expert system which is called religion. You can pray to God. There's a rush hour, say, please God help me, tell me what should I do. I say, okay, I have nothing against it. But what you do today, normally, you ask your navigation system. As your navigation system tells you, this rush hour or this will take such a long time, please move outside, etc. So in fact, already today, in everyday life, we rely in our human decision-making on advices from intelligent systems. Therefore, I confirm with James Lovelock, the inventor of the chaos theory, who wrote a book called No Machine. He says the next necessary step that we can solve our crisis, that we can solve our problems, is only possible with the help of artificial intelligence. So make a short introduction to your question, John, what I mean is biomedia. And I hope we can later come back to other very important aspects of the lectures of our previous keynote speakers.
Thank you very much for these insights, Peter. It's really, really very interesting and deep, and let's try to go deeper into this
exactly
after this. Okay, well, we have now our final panelist member has now arrived. Dr. Eric Prem. I'd like to introduce him now. He's the Chief Research, Technology, and Innovation Strategy Advisor and CEO of EUTEMA in Vienna. He is an internationally renowned expert in research and innovation strategy, and furthermore is a certified managerial economist and works scientifically in artificial intelligence. I know he doesn't do it anymore, but research politics, innovation research, and epistemology. And in fact, he holds doctorate degrees in both computer science and philosophy. So I would now like to pass on the same question that I asked before to Peter, is from your point of view, also as an ethics expert, how do you see the role of humankind in life going forward, and what do you see the issues involved?
Thank you very much, John. This, of course, is the $100 million question. Is there still a place for us, right? If artificial intelligence takes off in the way that so many seem to be expecting it. I, of course, am an optimist, and I think, yes, there is space, but that's also because probably I'm a technology pessimist, which is a bit surprising given that I worked in artificial intelligence, as you rightly pointed out, many thanks. But the truth is that there is only a room for us humans if we fight for it. So let me explain what I mean. Obviously, what we have today is already, for most of us at least, a post-digital life, as it's being called. So it's not a life after the digital, but it's a life where we are embracing the digital for just about everything we do. We meet our partners online. We let us help in sports. We order our food, whatever we do, it's just digitally mediated, including the vacuum cleaning robots that clean our floors, etc., etc. And as Peter Weibel already pointed out, these tools are slightly different from what you used to have. Of course, they are just machines. However, they are so complicated and they are so agent-like in their behavior that we are learning to treat them slightly, or we are automatically actually treating them slightly differently from what we did before. We develop, some of us actually develop relationships to them and can't let go of them. So we're seeing all sorts of new phenomena, and not everything is good. These phenomena are, although I'm less interested maybe in let's say this kind of human-like robots that people describe used to describe in science fiction and now also in philosophy papers. I do think the digital and the robotic aspects and AI have a significant impact on not just our lives, but perhaps also on what it means for us to be human. These things are actually changing the way, not just how we perceive the world, but also how we perceive ourselves. I think it was Luciano Floridi, the Oxford philosopher, who has pointed out we live in a world that is in a sense hyper-historic. So it's the history we now have is recorded. Well, everything about our history, about our lives, is being recorded at an unprecedented extent, which also means that we have a new sphere in which we are living, which is the infosphere, and that is, you can easily recognize that you're living in the infosphere when you can have a cyber war against whole nation states. and basically destroy the existence of not just people but whole states through such cyber wars. And this is the state of our society, I believe, at least for most parts of our society. And the questions are: so how do we deal with all these new phenomena? And one aspect is, of course, not to completely let go of the fact that we are humans, that we would like to be in power, that we would like to be the decision makers and designers of our future also in the next decade or two, perhaps, as Peter Weibel already said, perhaps with also the help of machines. I think there's no doubt about that. Perhaps also with taking more inspiration from the arts. I very much welcome Peter's proposal here. And why is that? I think what we can learn from the arts is, or what we have, especially engineers and artists have in common, is a poetic stance. It's a stance where we are not just painting a picture or something. It is about creating. It is about an act of creation, be it intelligent things, be it artworks. But this is how we humans typically understand the world, through the things that we create. That includes texts, that includes narratives, that includes also explanations in science. So in that sense, the artist and the scientist, as Peter rightly proposed, have a lot to do with each other. And I believe this is one way to go forward, because art is also very interesting in that it is a meaning-giving activity. And we as humans, we are creators of meaning every single day, and we should make sure that this is also that it stays like this in the future. And I think I'll stop here, not to preempt the discussion too much.
Okay, thanks very much. You have opened up some very interesting topics that would be very important to come back to, because, as you know, artful thinking is one of the foundations upon which GRASP was built, and it would be interesting to come back to that. Let's move on now to and actually switch the context, because we just heard from two very prestigious experts in the digital technologies of art, let's say. But now let's hear from some experts in the rest of the world, so to speak. That is, Santiago, I would like to ask you the same question, and which you will obviously have an answer for from a very different perspective, which is somebody working to save our ecosystem. How do you see the rule of home? How do you think we have to adjust our view of our role in all of life in order to survive?
Thanks a lot, John, for that question, and also thanks to the GRASP Network for the invitation to participate in this table. I've heard some extremely stimulating ideas, and I like a lot your choice of words. Your choice of words when you say, how do we need to adjust our role towards life? As I was thinking about the title of this discussion, The Future of Life, I remembered about one of the numbers that scares me the most, which is like 40 to 50 years ago, there was double the amount of live biomass on the planet. So we can actually quantify how much life there is by knowing how many kilograms of living things there are on this planet. And by that number, we have gone down by half over the past 40 to 50 years. And this happens because the system within which we operate is not configured to be compatible with life. Because, I mean, I will not be redundant here. This is, of course, extremely well understood by everyone on the table and on the audience. By having an economic system that requires to kill stuff in order for it to be fed and in order for it to grow, then of course it's impossible for that very same economic system to be compatible with life. So the adjustments that we need to make should have the consequence of there being a future that is actually compatible with life, because our current trajectory is not that trajectory. And I do think lots of these adjustments have to do with internalizing what are currently seen as externalities of our economic system and completely redesigning and rethinking the way in which we transact for what we need as a species on this planet. Now, of course, when I think of our role, I like to think of the human species. I mean, whether we like it or not, we have the role of shepherds of this planet now. Like, it's impossible to just even think of, like, leaving the planet be at this stage would not be enough. We now need to actively go and restore stuff that we have broken down over the past few decades, entire ecosystems. So humans no longer have the luxury of just like letting the planet be anymore. Like we now need to live in an actively managed planet, so that our so its ecosystemic services don't completely collapse. So in one word, I would think shepherds.
Mm-hmm. All right, excellent. That's quite fascinating, and I think it leads into my opportunity to ask Gareth the same question, which I think he can answer from a very, very close perspective, but more related to, let's say, the perspective of health. So Gareth, I would like to ask you the same question. How do you also think that we as humans have to sort of rethink our role in life going forward in order to be happy and healthy, so to speak? By the way, you're muted at the moment. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks, John. I mean, I think it has to be from my perspective, it's looking at a very simplistic. So, you know, like we have to take the responsibility ourselves. I know there's a lot of pressure on politicians and in terms of, well, you know, it has to come from this top-down approach. And I generally believe that it falls on our shoulders, and very much the health and well-being of the planet is connected to our own health and well-being. So, you know, as we've been discussing here, you know, it's clear to me, you know, if you don't have any water, you've got no health. Okay, so we're facing, you know, drought all over the world, and we're going to see massive displacement, which will lead into all sorts of security issues. And you know, you have rising waters, Bangladesh, for example, other areas which will suffer from climate change, which will lead to mass displacement of a lot of people that come towards Europe, which will cause all sorts of problems. Same in Africa and other areas. So I think we really need to take a broader approach in terms of our health and well-being. And then the economic model needs to change, move towards a knowledge-based economy, and more questions need to be asked, you know, in terms of how does the financial system work? Because, you know, from my perspective, when I worked as a public servant, as a civil servant, as a government advisor, I had no idea where my pension fund was going. I didn't have any interest in that at all until I left the service. I think the public health sector, the education system, the whole public sector has a massive role to play in this discussion. I think there's a wider conversation around how monetary value is created, how we value things. If you look at our whole ecosystem, it's very much attributed to you know, value creation for things that are not really delivering value. So a lot of it is false, it's noise. So the people who are delivering the real value, the guys who go out and do volunteer work, who help those who are homeless, that's real value creation. You know, how do we justify the cost of all these things? We seem to always have this ideology that it's cost-based, it's draining the system. It should be value creation. If you look at the COVID situation, for example, we can find the finance for all these track and trace and putting these stop gaps in place. However, if we had it invested in preventative measures previously, we wouldn't be in this position. So where do we learn? How do we learn going forward? This is a journey for me in terms of, you know, we are all coming to an evolution here where we move forward together. But these are really times of questions, really asking the poignant questions, and taking accountability and responsibility, John. That's my kind of thought on it. You know, health is it, and spiritually as well. I think the faith groups as well have a huge role to play in this going forward. from the point of view that, you know, where are their investments going? I know that's just part of the discussions we're involved in with the faith communities, to mobilize large sums of capital into the future. You know, these are huge, you know, they have a lot of, should we say, capital, which has been invested in oil, which needs to be divested. Can we mobilize that capital into community activities and create new value? So again, related to health and well-being, you know, I think this is a good opportunity for us.
I'd like to follow up very briefly on what you've been saying, Gareth, to you. In fact, the European Commission has made a so-called value-based healthcare a strategic priority. And this sounds rather hard-nosed, kind of business-like view of healthcare. And I think that probably scares people a lot. So could you say just a few words about what do you mean by saying value in this kind of context?
So I think we all have to have this conversation as well. Everyone has the misconception of the NHS as being free at the point of care and free in terms of primary care, and that none of this is free. Like, everyone is paying for this. You know, this is all done from pension funds. It's all borrowed money. The public sector is investing in private companies, and asset managers are moving money around. It's one circular economy. Like, it's very important that we get that out in the discussion as well. And you can see the benefits for the UK economy in terms of investing in the NHS, for example. In terms of value-based and European community moving forward on that, I mean, there is, what I mean by is, when I worked in the public health sector in Ireland, for example, you know, you have a £17 billion budget per annum, which is, you know, disseminated across 115,000 staff. And, you know, you're delivering health services at the point of access. And some of it is free, then some of it goes to private. But it's very important for people to understand that when people run private practices, for example, in the public health sector, that all the facilities are paid for by the public purse, but they're used by private consultants. So people need to understand how this all works. For example, you can be a public consultant earning 200,000 per annum and have your private practice, which is facilitated by the public hospital. So there needs to be this conversation as well. People generally think, if I go for private consultations, I get better care. This is complete nonsense. You are far better being within a public hospital, a public teaching hospital, where the academic is based. And these are sort of the discussions, understanding how you navigate a health system as well. You know, a lot of people will say, I want, you know, my cancer center local. I want, that's again, you need to have that conversation with people to make them understand that if you have a local service, you won't have the number of cases. You won't have experts able to identify the cancers. You'll have a far better outcome if you have a center of excellence. So we need to understand that and have that broader conversation. Even, you know, cancers, health is a topic that needs to be completely opened up, and there needs to be explanations. You have to work in transparency, honesty, work with integrity. These are the sort of areas and values that I think we can bring forward. If we have this discussion, you can then understand how the value is generated. And what I mean by value, just to give you an example, you know, people who are committing suicide in the UK, the cost to the exchequer is about 1.7 million. If you put in an early intervention where you have a community nurse, you could probably offset those costs and save maybe 40 lives. So there's your value proposition. That's where I'm looking at it. And again, it goes for green emissions, zero emission buses, water usage, everything. This all leads air pollution, massive problems. 9 million people a year are dying from air pollution. You know, these are all things that we need to look at in terms of value creation.
Okay, thanks very much. That's I think it's really quite clear now what you're talking about. So I'd like to jump back to a topic that we brushed on before, but I'd like to take a look at it from a different point of view. And I'd like to bring in Eric into the discussion on this. Let me explain to you what I'm thinking about, because I think this involves both technology and actually philosophy. So at the Austrian Pavilion at Expo Dubai, which you heard about earlier, the theme this year was connecting minds and creating the future in an increasingly networked world. Now, we found a GRASP network, which is the organizer of the symposium, due to concerns that in this increasingly networked, less physical world, it will begin to neglect the fact that we are composed of both mind and body. So do you think, Eric, do you think that this increasingly networked world, can digital humanism help us with this? Can help us deal with the fact that we are human beings with bodies, and the more we become network, the more we may become degenerate from what we were before.
Mm.
And you help us sort that out.
I'm not sure, John, whether you looked up my list of publications, because I used to be a strong promoter, and still am, of the view that of course it's relevant we have bodies, and our brains, if you look very closely, were in fact invented to move our bodies through a sometimes hostile and sometimes useful environment. And that's all they do. This is what brains are for. They are for navigating through jungles and through the savannah, and swimming, and what else, you know, and for mating and finding food and all that sort of thing. So unsurprisingly, you know, our higher levels of intelligence are then also grounded. Literally in these bodily experiences, and this is actually something that many people have been trying to point out. It was very fashionable in the 80s and 90s of the last century, and through this massive virtualization, digitization recently, and perhaps including networking, as you just said. We have a little bit forgotten about this very important fact, but it is absolutely relevant, and it poses a very interesting question. It poses the question, when we look at the future, since this is the title of the panel, what are the things that are not going to change in the future, and what are those which are subject to change? Now, obviously, in the next 1, 2, 3 decades, I believe many things related to our bodies are not going to change. You know, this. So these are some of the invariants that we will still have to deal with, regardless of a certain progress in medicine and other things that we may do to our bodies. But I still think these will deliver some of the facts that we need to accept. And we should be wise enough to take those into account and understand ourselves also as bodily beings, also as beings that have social needs and all that. Mm-hmm. But for me, the more interesting question, and I'm not sure you want to go to that question already now, is, of course, when we are networking people, mm-hmm. This is everybody loves that. It is. I'd like to participate in panels like this, and hopefully it brings together people in a fruitful exchange that is bigger than just, you know, everyone of us on their own. However, there is a question to be asked about who has the power in these networking networks, and I think this is an important thing where we have to be really careful. We see many instances now where those who own the network have the power. To design not just the answers, but also the power to ask the questions, and all sorts of things. And I think this is something that is really important for our future. We need to make sure that we get this right.
So that's a major challenge, is to deal with who owns the means. That gets us into also economics, of course, and I would like to go back therefore to Santiago because you started to talk about it, and Gareth already has, about the economics of assuring health. But can you tell me what are the economics of assuring life? I mean, what kind of economy is compatible with life? What are the things that need to change that aren't that way already?
Thanks a lot for that question, John. There's been a lot of energy invested into the idea that the climate crisis will have an economic solution or no solution at all.
Yes.
And after the Kyoto Protocol practically broke down because countries were not asked what they thought before that document was put forth by the United Nations, two very brilliant Latin American women, Patricia Espinosa and Cristiana Figueres, were able to figure out that in order for there to actually be a solution to the climate crisis, they would need to bring countries together around an economic solution. And an economic solution has to do with internalizing what are currently externalities to the economy that are damaging to the environment. So for example, if you pollute water during the process of making Coke, then you can't have the cost of that water being polluted outside the cost structure of one can of Coke. It needs to be inside the cost structure of this can of Coke so that Coke actually does something about it. This idea, what's dangerous about it is that it is not the complete solution. A lot of the reason why we are facing such a large threat to life itself is conscience-oriented and has more to do with our understanding of humanity itself, the values that we wish to embody as a species as we go forward in our evolution, and what philosophy we want our grandchildren to be nurtured of. But from a more technocratic perspective, it's helped a lot. And there even is an economical unit, which is now a commodity, one of the most complex commodities in history, around which a lot of this revolves, which is 1 ton of greenhouse gas emitted to the atmosphere, or sequestered from the atmosphere, or avoided to the atmosphere, etc. And this has created a primary and a secondary market that is growing faster than, I think, everything except some of the most high-tech, cutting-edge stuff, such as AI, AI, I'm missing a word in English, biotech, I think would be the term, and other fast-growing markets, right? If you are able to take 1 ton of CO2 equivalent from the atmosphere and put it in the ground in an additional and permanent way, there's value in that. And it turns out you can sequester greenhouse gases on Earth by doing land restoration, by doing remediation of large water bodies, by doing smarter agriculture, by doing smarter transportation. So as we move towards a net zero economy, and moving towards a net zero economy there is no aspect of our global industrial machine that will be untouched. And I think that also is one of the key economic opportunities that you see in facing the climate crisis.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that's been a very thorough exposition of the many kinds of economic questions we are facing, of many types, going forward. There's one question we haven't addressed yet in the in this roundtable, and this is a question that Gabriela raised, and this is about I don't know if you've noticed, but we are all men. Now, I would like to ask, I would like to pass the floor to Peter now, Peter Weibel, to ask whether you have some comments on the role of women in art and technology, and how we can improve the situation. What has your experience been? What can we do?
I can give you an answer, but I have to make a little introduction to the question of the body, which was raised by Eric here.
Yep.
We have to be very careful about this question, because what we see now here, part of the infosphere, which has been mentioned, is that we need a body to maybe to produce a message. We need a body maybe to receive a message, but we don't need a body anymore to transport the message to communicate. We have electromagnetic waves. This happened in the middle of 19th century. So in the middle of 19th century happened something very important.
I don't see your video on. Can you possibly turn your video on? I don't know if you can find the button.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
In the middle of 19th century,
perfect.
we see that the invention of electromagnetic waves, the first time happened, the most important thing, the separation of the body who transport the message, and the separation between messenger and message. Since then, a message can travel without the body. For example, when the famous philosopher Descartes said we have res extensa, bodies, we have res cogitans, thinking things. So today we have thinking things like Alexa without the body. So the best, so we have to discuss very carefully the question of the body. And what we see here now, that they can communicate, means precisely it's industry, we can communicate without the transport, without the messenger. And this event is here for endless, for always. You see, technically, we could have done this kind of this online conference 10 years ago, but there was culture was against it. And what comes now from this obstacle is what I call a misuse of language, very difficult misuse of language. For example, in COVID, every day, in politics and media, they say the body, as I say, virus knows no border. And this is not true. The virus knows a border, 2 meters. Therefore, we make distance. Then they say every day, politicians and media, the virus is spreading around. No, not the virus is distributed. We distribute, we human beings, we distribute the virus. We spread it, not the virus. And now comes the next point, which is so difficult to understand. When Dahm spoke about Schweitzer, when he said 1913, I'm alive, as it wants to live, in the midst of life that wants to live, is only half of the truth, because we live by the death of other people, other human beings, but other living creatures. We live by killing animals, and we live by eating plants, etc. So that sentence of, this is the sentence of Schweitzer is only half the truth, because we kill life for our life. This is in fact the problem of climate crisis. This is the worst euphemism I have ever read. It's not about the climate crisis, it's about the life crisis. Therefore, I like the title of this conference, The Future of Life, because when we destroy, when we have mass extinction, when we destroy our biosphere, then we destroy us. So it's a bio-crisis, it's a crisis of our life. And therefore, it is very euphemistic to speak about climate crisis, because it's the center is, as we know from COVID, that we see, and also when Eric talks about health, we see how many people die because of this kind of crisis. Therefore, I would say we have to be, but the problem is in fact what happened already with the famous monk in Firenze, Savonarola.
Yes.
Savonarola he made 2 books, which killed him finally. He made 1 book, a long poem called The End of the World. So the church said, wonderful, bravo, because when you have apocalyptic visions, you can win believers, you can win people who go into the institution of the church. But then, 7 years later, he made a book, a long poem called End of Church, Finis Ecclesiae. Then he had to die in flames. And today we have the same. And it was mentioned very often by financial system, by Eric, it was mentioned by you, Santiago. We have a system, a financial system, which is comparable to the institution of the church. So when we are not able to change the system, we will never be able to change our biosphere. So we have the end of the world as one thing. So I always say, I believe in the end of the world, but I do not believe in the end of capitalism, because system change is difficult. We have mentioned this many times. So what we have about the question studies is a difficult question. Maybe we can discuss a little bit. One solution we have by feminism, like Donna Haraway, who has made this cyborg manifesto, and see, it makes a proposition. We have to extend the human into non-human areas. That means in one direction, non-human cyborgs, in another direction, non-human animals and plants. So her answer from feminism is the strongest radical solution, also mentioned by the key speaker before. Feminism is now proposing beyond the gender question. Fortunately, it's a question, how can we extend the human to non-human entities? Maybe I would ask Eric how optimistic he is about this idea. It's a difficult question, Eric, no?
Go ahead, Eric.
Also, the question of digital humanism. No? How can we have digital humanism when feminists propose to us we should extend the human to non-human entities, cyborgs, automates, artificial intelligence on one side, and plants and animals on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Peter. As always, hugely inspiring. I would like to add to this question of the disembodiment of the
Exactly.
message.
Exactly.
Even you know that Franz Kafka already wrote about the letter. That the letter is outrageous, because how can you deliver a message by writing a letter when you're not present there?
Exactly.
So I think this is really good to read and to remind ourselves today about these how absurd this also all of this also is. So about the extension, well, it's very interesting. I'm neither, I would say, I'm so-so. I'm undecided a bit, because on the one hand, you have these phenomena that people can extend their bodies and experience artificially, and experience this as parts of their selves. And I'm sure you know Stellark. Stellark for me is a hero in this context. I mean, he was early, I think it was the 80s, it must have been the 80s when he did many of his experiments, I would call them, when he extended his body with artificial limbs that were partially controlled by his brain, and he experienced this very much as parts of his body. And I'm lucky enough, I met him once in France, and we were asking him whether this is, he had this additional arm, a third arm that he could control with his brain waves. And we asked him whether this is for him difficult to have another arm. And he said, typically no. So typically he can very well manage that, an additional arm, except when he gets stressed out and there's too much going on in the environment, then it becomes too difficult. So I think there are, and it's actually a known phenomenon from cognitive science, that we can even experience completely, let's say, completely dead parts, like a hammer, as parts of our body, and it's actually how we interact with the world. I am more skeptical when it comes to things like downloading brains into computers and things like that, for many different reasons, including mathematical ones. So I don't want to go there, but there's whenever people talk about this, I would say there is a lack of evidence we can do it. So I'm unconvinced, and I think it's the burden of proof is on the other side.
Comments from your side, Santiago? I notice you nodding now and then. I think this all has a certain amount of bearing on your work.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking a lot about how we also use our physical bodies to operate on physical spaces.
Yeah.
We have to give us understanding about how we should behave, for example, in the interior of organizations. And I do think certain organizations have become very important for humankind. I think on organizations like universities, humankind has always chosen a physical space to share, build, and store knowledge. And those temples to humankind are what we call universities today. And I really wonder if not only without our physical bodies, but also without the physical spaces that we have come to call universities for millennia now, are we going to be able to do such a good job as being humans as we were able to do before we were deprived of our capacity to move within those spaces? I don't know. Also, the enterprise is another relevant organization for humankind. I work in an enterprise which has some remote stuff going on all the time, but also we do land restoration, and it's very uncomfortable because we need to actually go to the land that we need to restore, and we actually need to work there. But we have devoted a large amount of time and resources to construct physical digital spaces, because if not, then employees don't know what to do. Like they are used to knowing where HR is, where finance is, where business development should be happening, where the conference room is, and just knowing where these places exist in their physical realm and how they can physically interact using their bodies with these spaces gives them cues on how they should behave and what they should do, and this gives them mental peace. When you remove this physical structure in the office, that provokes anxiety, because people are unaware of what is expected of them, and they are unaware of what is fair for them to expect from their colleagues and counterparts. So I was, what Peter and what Eric were talking about made me think a lot about not only how it is probably not only through our bodies that we live in the physical space, but also through very important institutions and organizations that we have been accustomed to interacting with throughout time as a species, such as universities and enterprises.
John, do you hear me?
Yes.
Can I answer to this point, last point of Santiago?
Yes, by all means.
Yeah, it's very, very important. Yeah. Thank you, Santiago. Wonderful point here. Because when we look at the development of the infosphere in the Silicon Valley, so Nida Rubelin in his lecture blamed very correctly the monopoly and the power of these big companies here. But the point is now, all these companies have been founded by people who have been did not even finish their studies. This is by what is called what's the English name for this? The Ausbrecher?
Dropouts.
Dropouts. Yes.
Dropout, yeah, thank you, dropouts, yeah. That's very strange. Yeah. So that this section of infosphere, all the big companies are founded by dropouts which have no academic career.
Yes.
I would say this is a mistake of state. We have to ask how is it possible that the state was not able to make this infosphere himself. And now to say the state should try to do it, it's too late. On the other side, we see something interesting in medicine, like say COVID treatment was done by many people since 20, 30 years on academic level. But also again is a problem at the end. We had a private company like BioNTech and Pfizer. So we see we have a gap between one side academic research and other sides what Santiago said, institutions, but they are on one side, on the other side, commercial companies. And I think one of the problems we have today is precisely this gap, because now we are blaming us a monopoly of, but then I ask myself, okay, why is the state, why is the academic has not done it themselves? They could have done it. When the state gives them the money, for example, now comes the point, the state gives to CERN in Geneva, the European Union every year, 1 billion. America gives another 1 billion, and the end they have $3 billion for particle physics in CERN. Why don't they have $3 billion for biosciences and other things by the state? So why can't these physicists make this kind of research on such a high level to find invisible particles? Nice and good, but we have to be careful. We have other duties too. Why this is done by private companies? In one part, a little bit with institutions, but the many parts without institutions. We are lucky that the medicine still we have the possibility. But here again, like what is done by Geras is a non-governmental organization. Why do we need also Eric in value systems so many non-government institutions and other institutions and private institutions to solve these problems? I think this is a very important point.
Excellent. Fantastic. Eric, you just unmuted.
Yes,
Eric.
thanks. Thanks for being so attentive. I think I would like to add to this. So I think everything that was said is very true. I'm a bit skeptical about blaming capitalism too much here for lack of alternative, and also I'm one of those guys who believes it's still an efficient distribution mechanism. But what lies at the root of this problem of Silicon Valley values is, of course, and I don't think this is the only aspect, but I think it is a major part of it, is this serving of individualism. Of course, the success of those big companies roots in the fact that it delivers services to the individual that the individual likes. For whatever reason, we can of course question that and say that's all unnecessary and shouldn't be like that. But there is a massive belief in California or in Silicon Valley that it is the individual and the individual alone that should be the decisive decision maker in how to distribute the resources, and then these resources should go where the individual is served and supported best with those services that those companies create. So I think this is the root, and it's very interesting that especially in information technology, we have a picture that is also very much oriented at the single individuum that for which we design those systems. So typically all our systems are made for single users, and they are made, even when there are communication systems, but on their ends, they are always focusing on the single user. A concept such as society, a concept even such as a group or any shared value is not typically somewhere intrinsically contained in the design of an information system. That is, at its roots, this is a very specific way of thinking about systems. It's very different from how we live typically in small groups or in our cities or in rural villages. This is just something that's not included, and computer scientists and economists alike are only beginning to look at this more systematically. PS, I also think that may be a difference in the world of art, because art always has it makes very little, although it exists, but there's very little sense in having this one-to-one relationship. This typically you always have a communicative aspect that includes at least a group, if not more. But that's just a side remark.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really glad that you closed on this last remark about art, because that brings us back to grasps. I'm sorry to say that we've reached the end of
one sentence. The argument of Eric is very convincing, because Khrushchev said on the question of why did the Soviet Union fail? And he said precisely, we have not produced enough commodities for individuals. We should have produced more refrigerators and other commodities. We created too much for societies. Correct, Eric.
Thanks very much. Santiago, would you like to make a final closing remark?
Yeah, I mean, and then the Soviet Union would have the same environmental impact that the United States did, right? So we're happy Khrushchev didn't do more refrigerators before. That would be because the individual still is a victim of the tragedy of the commons, right? Which is why Silicon Valley values should never be allowed to rule the world.
Well said.
That's correct.
Thanks very much. Well, listen, thanks to all of you. We could go on for hours. It has been very, very exciting. And we would like to offer to all of you that GRASP organizes sometime in the future a symposium with you on the topics that have been discussed. And by the way, go to the blog section on our website, and you will indeed see several blogs writing about the dichotomy of mind and body so that we had discussed tonight. So we are extremely happy to have had exactly you participate in our roundtable, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future, of course. So now I would like to pass back the baton to Rania, who will pass us on to the next exciting moment in our symposium.